What's she gonna do?
And not every kid does that either because, like, a friend of ours, like, he is, I guess, 9 months, maybe 10 months, and he's just now, like, starting to sleep through the night. Like,
I knew a girl once that ate a stick of butter. Like, I watched her do it. It was
a whole
disgusting.
stick.
Ding dong.
Hey, I'll get it.
Oh, stick.
Hey, welcome to Life Group. There's people in the living room. There's food on the table. Just make yourself at home. Come on.
Food? Friends? Make myself at home? There's no rules!
Put your shirt back on.
There's one rule! Chips. I love dip. One rule, huh? Nobody said anything about double dipping. They're on to me. I'm going for it.
No.
There's 2 rules!
Good morning. Today we are talking about life groups, and there are 2 rules, people. Keep your clothes on, no double dipping chips, okay? Like Curtis said earlier, we're finishing up our life group series today, and we're just so glad that you guys are here with us to kind of hear our passion and the importance of why we believe everyone should take that next step and join a life group. And so today, we're going to start in the book of Ecclesiastes. So if you have your Bible or a smartphone, go ahead and take that out. And we are going to be on page 429. And once you find it, go ahead and hold your place. Ecclesiastes is a great book, so I want to give you some of the background to the book of Ecclesiastes, some of the information about it before we dig deep into it. So Ecclesiastes was a book written by a man named Solomon, and Solomon was a king. Solomon was the son of David, who was the same David who killed Goliath. David, a man after God's own heart, had Solomon, and you can kind of assume because David loved God so much, so did Solomon. And so eventually David dies, and Solomon becomes king. And being a young leader and being a young king, fully devoted to God and fully in love with God, he offers up 1,000 burnt offerings to God. That's something they used to do in the Old Testament to show like a personal devotion to God. And so Solomon doesn't just offer up 1, he doesn't offer up 5 or 10, he offers up 1,000 offerings to God to say, God, I'm devoted to you and I love you. And God is so pleased, he is so pleased with Solomon that he actually talks to Solomon. He says, Solomon, I'm pleased with you. If there's one thing that you could have, what would it be? So in this moment, God kind of becomes a magic genie. And so, some of you are thinking Solomon should ask for 3 wishes instead of 1. But essentially, so God comes to Solomon and says, Solomon, if there's anything you could have, what would it be? So if you were in Solomon's place, what would you ask God for? I know for me, being an Orioles fan, I'd probably ask God for an Orioles World Series. Because I know that if God doesn't intervene sometime, it's never going to happen. But maybe you ask God for peace. Maybe you ask God for health, the opportunity to live a long life, to see, your grandkids and your great-grandkids and so on. And maybe you ask God for money, just enough to get by. Maybe you ask God for an abundance of money, a ton of money, so that you never have to work again. So what is that one thing you would ask God for? And Solomon has this opportunity. Solomon can ask for whatever he wants. God is pleased with him. God will give him whatever he asks for. And Solomon says to God, God, I'm a young leader. I'm a young king. I'm a father. I'm a son. I'm a friend. The thing that I need the most is wisdom. So Solomon talks to God and he says, God, I need wisdom. And God is, again, so pleased with Solomon. This is what God says back to him. He says, I will give you a wise and understanding heart so that there has never been anyone like you before and never will be again. God is so pleased with Solomon. He says to him, you know what? I'm not just going to give you some wisdom, a little bit of wisdom. I'm going to make you the wisest person who has ever lived and who will ever live. There will never be someone wiser. And that's a lot when you think about it, because you think about people who we know that are wise. We think about, the typical, like, Gandhi. He was always throwing out, like, tons of wisdom. You think about Mother Teresa. Some of you, Oprah. She's wise. But Solomon is the wisest person who has ever lived, and no one ever will be wiser than Solomon. And Solomon, he gets to the end of his life and he decides to write a book. So he has taken all this wisdom and he's decided, I'm going to put this in a book. And that's what Ecclesiastes is. So Ecclesiastes is in this grouping in the Old Testament, so in the first half of the Bible, that we called wisdom literature. And it goes along with Psalms, Proverbs, Job, and Song of Songs, and you add Ecclesiastes. And you've got these 5 books that are dedicated fully to wisdom. And if you're ever wondering, just a side note, if you're ever wondering, I want to read my Bible more, where should I begin? Those are some good books to start in. Psalms and Proverbs especially. Ecclesiastes is a great book, but I suggest you read through the entire thing, and I'll explain that a little bit more in a little bit. And so Solomon, the wisest person ever, writes a book. And just imagine if the wisest person you knew, and you know now, decided at the end of their life to write a book. For some of us, that's our parents or that's our grandparents, or maybe that's like a historical icon of some sense, and you're thinking, man, if this person at the end of their life could write a book, this would be one of the greatest books of all time. And when I think about that, I think of my great-grandma, whose name we called Grammy, and I think about my Grammy. She was 94 years old when she passed away, and she was born in 1904, and she died in 1998. So this woman lived pretty much the 20th century. And so I can just imagine the things that she got to experience, the things she saw, the things she, witnessed, both world wars, Vietnam, a person walking on the moon, which, I can't even imagine what that felt like to see, considering they thought that would never happen. One of her favorite things that ever happened, she would tell us all the time, was the invention of the television. She just thought that was amazing, so she loved it. And one of the really cool things about my Grammy was not only that she got to experience a whole lot of things that happened in the 20th century, but she was also deaf. And so she witnessed all these things through in a different way than what most of us would see these things. And so I can imagine if at the end of her life she wrote a book, it would be one of the greatest books of all time. Her wisdom, her words, the things she saw, the things she learned with kids and grandkids and all that, it would be amazing. And as much as I love my Grammy, Solomon definitely trumps her when it comes to wisdom and knowledge. And so Solomon has written this book called Ecclesiastes. And Solomon, like I said earlier, it's a great book to read, but you should read the whole thing because it's kind of depressing. If you've never read Ecclesiastes, it's one of those books. Solomon goes through and he kind of, for 12 chapters, talks about all the things in life that are worthless. And he specifically uses the word futile, which means incapable of producing results. And he starts off and he says, I've had money, and that was futile. I had power, futile. He even says, I've had knowledge. The wisest person ever lived says, I have knowledge. I am the wisest ever, and it's worthless. It's incapable of producing results. And when you think about that, you're wondering, okay, what is he trying to get? And essentially it's just, these things do not bring joy. These things are incapable. And so that's kind of what the book feels like. So once you push through it, you can get to the end, it's great. But I want you to be aware that it is kind of depressing to start. And in the middle of this, futile, everything's worthless, none of this produces results. This is terrible. These things that I've searched for and I've seeked, and these things that I wanted, are worthless. He gets to a little part in Ecclesiastes 4, 9 through 12, and this little nugget on being alone is worthless. And this is what it says. Ecclesiastes 4, 9 through 12. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their efforts. For if either falls, his companion can lift him up. But pity the one who falls without another to lift him up. Also, if 2 lie down together, they can keep warm. But how can one person keep warm alone? And if someone overpowers one person, 2 can resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. And so the wisest person who will ever live says straight up, doing life alone is worthless. It won't bring you joy. There are no results that are good that come from doing these things by yourself. And he says very clearly, 2 things are better than 1. He says, if you fall down, you have to have somebody to pick you back up. And he even goes a little bit further to say, we should actually have pity for the people. We should feel bad for the people that don't have anyone. And when he talks about falling down, it's not just a physical, I trip and I fall. But he's talking about much more than that, like an emotional falling, a spiritual falling, the times that people have fallen. We should feel bad for the people who fall and don't have someone to pick them up. And that's what we need in our lives. He also says, how can one person keep warm alone? And for those of you who are married, you understand this. When I first got married, you're used to sleeping in a bed by yourself for a very long time. then you get married, and there's like a furnace sleeping right next to you. It's ridiculous. And so it took me a while to adjust, but when there are two people, you can keep warm. And then he also says, two people, can protect you. You can be protected when you have somebody else. When someone's got your back, two of you can stand defense. And then he finishes with, more than that, even two or even three is better than two. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. And he could have continued to say, and 4 is better than 3, and 5 is better than 4, but he's a wise man, and he knows that's boring, so we skip that. And so Solomon tells us it's worthless to do life alone. And there's a story in the Bible, and this, all of Solomon's wisdom and his thoughts remind me of a story in Luke 5:17 through 26, and we're going to go over that together. It's on page 666. Awkward. Before service, I didn't know what page it was, and I was looking it up, and I was like, 666. Like, well, you can read that, guys, just so you know. You don't have to skip page 666 in your Bible. It's okay. So we've got this really cool story, and I'm going to paraphrase it for you, but if you want to read along, you can. But essentially, it's during Jesus' ministry. And when Jesus comes around, people flock. People had heard who Jesus was. They had heard rumors. This guy claims to be the Son of God. Who is he? And so when Jesus came to town, people came from all over just to hear him talk. The story says that people came from Judea and Samaria, and we're talking about 100 miles away. People are coming in to hear Jesus speak and hear Jesus talk. And so they crowd in this house, and it talks about how the crowd is so strong. There's so many people in this house that it's overflowing. And you can kind of just imagine people like standing outside, like peeking in the windows just to try to get a glimpse of Jesus. And it reminds me when the Ravens won the Super Bowl, they said the stadium holds about 85,000 people. But during the parade, there were over 100,000 people that packed into that stadium. It was bursting at the seams just so people could get a glimpse of what was happening. And this is the same thing that's happening to Jesus. He's in this home, and it's packed out. There's not a free seat in the house. And so Jesus is teaching, and it says that God had given him authority to heal people. And the story right before this, he actually heals a blind man. And so word starts to get around that Jesus is a healer, that he can heal people. And the story is about this guy who's paralyzed and his 3 friends. And so you've got this guy who's paralyzed. He's stuck on a mat. He can't go anywhere. And him and his 3 friends realize in order for him to be healed, we got to get him to Jesus. We have to pick him up, and we have to physically take him to where Jesus is. And, we're not talking he just went down the street a little bit. We're talking miles. They pick their friend up, and they carry their friend miles to this house just because they want the opportunity to see Jesus. They don't know if they're going to see Jesus. They don't know if they're going to get into the house, but they believe, and they have faith that if they have the opportunity, Jesus can heal their friend. And so they carry their friend all the way there, and when they get there, it's too late. The house is full. It says they tried to get in, they couldn't. You can just imagine like shoulder to shoulder and them trying to push through and trying to carry their friend in. And they realize, we brought our friend all this way just because we hope Jesus can heal him, and we can't get in. And so a lot of us, that's about as far as we'd take this story. If we were carrying the friend, that's about when we'd stop and say, you know what? We did our best. We had this opportunity. We tried our best. We carried you this far. Let's wait till the next time he comes to town. Or let's take a step back, and maybe on his way out, he'll see us. For a lot of us, that's about as far as we take it, because we know we tried really hard, and it was tough. It wasn't easy, and we brought our friend as far as we could go, but it just didn't work. But the story continues. The 3 friends grab their friend, and they bring him up to the roof. And once they're on the roof, what they do is they rip open the tiles from the roof. They tie rope to his mat, which is scary. You talk about believing in some friends, lay on a mat, let your friends tie a rope to it and lower you down from any distance. And what they do is they rip the tiles off the roof, and they lower their friend down into this house because that's how much they wanted Jesus to heal their friend. And the story says when the guy got in front of him, Jesus said, because you and your friends believed, your sins are forgiven. And there's people in the house, there's these Pharisees, which are kind of these just religious punks that just don't get it. They don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God. And they say, guy, the only person who can forgive sins is God. And Jesus says, well, surely I am the Son of God. I can do this. And he says, check this out. Get up and walk. So not only did Jesus forgive this guy's sin, the guy then gets up, picks up his mat, and walks out of the house. And everybody there was amazed. And I can imagine if I were that guy, the first thing I would do when I got out of that house, when I walked out of that house, is I'd go to my friends and I'd hug them. I'd say thank you, because I couldn't do this alone. But that group of friends, they understood that you cannot do life alone. They understood it. In order for their friend to be healed, they had to carry the weight. And how many of us want our friends to be healed? How many of us are willing to carry our friend so that they can be healed? I'm not just talking down the street. I'm talking who's willing to carry their friend 5 miles so that they can be healed? You know, when I think about that, and I think, do I have these friends? I'm very, very lucky to have a group of friends that I know would carry me if that's what I needed. And here's a picture of them. We've got, on the end, it's CT, C-Dub, Curtis, or me and Curtis. And these are the 3 closest friends I have. We met in college, through separate things, and realized we had a lot in common. And so as we continue to become friends and continue to grow in our friendship, we decided that every Tuesday night we would get together and we'd go to Applebee's. We lived in Johnson City. Applebee's was the only place you could go to after 8 o'clock at night. So we'd go to Applebee's, we'd do half-price appetizers, because again, we're college kids, so we're cheap. And we would sit and we would just talk about life. What's going on, the good things, the bad, the school, the home, anything that was going on. We'd get together on Tuesdays, and that's what we'd work through. And we understood that we could not do life alone, and so we needed to have people in our lives to pick us up when we had fallen down. And so we did this. We met for 2 years at Applebee's every Tuesday. We knew the servers. We always got the same server. It kind of became a ritual. And we got to the end of our junior year, and we decided, instead of just going home for summer, we wanted to end it with an awesome time. So we decided to go camping. Do I have any campers in here? People that like camping? First Service had a ton of people who like camping. I hate camping. Camping's not fun. My wife and I talk about camping all the time, and she's like, why would I go sleep on a ground when I have a bed? And I would even take it one step further. I'd rather sleep on carpet than on a cold, wet ground. And so I am not a camper. I by no means enjoy camping, but all 3 of them wanted to go, so I decided, hey, I'm not going to be the party pooper. I'm going to go camping. So the night before we went camping, we go to Walmart, and we pick up the essentials. We bought 16 pounds of steak. We bought oatmeal cream pies, because that was a must, Doritos, and Mountain Dew. And that's pretty much what we got, the essentials. And so we're going through Walmart, and this will just kind of prove to you guys how much I'm not a camper. We're in the checkout line, and I'm thinking, oh, there's hand sanitizer. I'm going to put this in the cart. So I pick up hand sanitizer, put it in the cart, and it was kind of like that video. It was like, smack, no! You will not bring hand sanitizer camping. And so that's kind of me in camping. I don't want to go rough it. That's not fun. But so we pack up, and we go camping, and it actually turns out it's a lot of fun. We find a nice little spot right on the lake. We start a fire. We do what men do. We cut down trees, and we climb things, and we just kind of go crazy. But it was a lot of fun. As the night died down and the fire died down, we knew it was time to go to bed. And so we all get in the tent, and just kind of paint the picture. This wasn't just a normal tent. There were 4 of us. This wasn't a 4-person tent. This tent could fit 16 people. Curtis went out and bought the largest tent Walmart had, and that was our tent. There was enough room for 20 people to be around. I'm pretty sure the tent was bigger than my apartment that I live in now. And so we get in this tent, and we're all getting ready for bed, and we're kind of, just putting our stuff aside, and I realize something's wrong. I'm looking around, and I realize everybody has sleeping bags but me. Yep, a non-camper right here. I own a sleeping bag. That's the best part. I own one. It's under my bed at college. So I get there, and I realize, oh, man, these guys are in sleeping bags. I brought a comforter, just a blanket, yep, a twin-size comforter, and a pillow. So, I'm like, what, it can't be that bad. It's May, it's Tennessee, it was warm all day, we've had a little bit of a fire, it can't be that bad. So, I bundle up, and we go to bed. About 2 hours later, I am freezing to death. It was so cold, it hurt. And so I'm like, what do I do? Okay, I'm looking around. I'm like, all right, well, socks. Put on more socks. I'm like, well, I've got a pair of shorts and a pair of sweatpants. I'll wear them both. So I'm putting on extra clothes, I'm putting on a hoodie, I'm putting on a hat, and I'm like, all right, this will be fine. So I bundle up, I kind of curl into the fetal position and hope that I get warm, and I try to fall back asleep. About an hour later, I realize this is terrible. Like, I am freezing to death. This is the worst experience of my life. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, what would Bear Grylls do? At the time, I was a huge fan of Man vs. Wild. I love that show. So much that I'd watched every episode, and I'd rewatch them because I was prepared. If I was ever in Antarctica after parachuting out of a helicopter, I'd be ready because Bear Grylls had taught me what to do. I was so obsessed with the show that I actually had all the iPod versions on my iPod. So if my plane ever crashed in the middle of the ocean, it wouldn't be lost and I'd be stuck there forever. I could make it home. And so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, what would Bear Grylls do? And that's when I start to realize Bear Grylls says when you're cold, the best way to get warmth is body heat. Yep. And I'm thinking, well, body heat's the way to go. Solomon also says, how can one person keep warm alone? Time to cuddle. So I'm laying there, and I've got about 6 feet in between me and Curtis. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to inch a little closer. Not too far. So now I'm about 4 feet. I'm like, nope, this isn't really working. It's still cold. I'm freezing. All right, well, let's go to 2 feet. So I'm sliding closer. I'm like, nope, it's not working. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to move a little bit closer. So I move closer. I'm about 6 inches away from Curtis at the time. He's still asleep, by the way. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm freezing, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. Bear Grylls says body heat. So it was the opportunity. I was like, do I spoon my best friend? That's the crossroads that I'm at, people. I'm that cold. I'm thinking about spooning my best friend, who is sleeping. So I can tell you the rest of the story went like this. I moved back to 6 feet, and I froze that night. Yes, thank you. I did not spoon my best friend. And the best part about this story is that Curtis didn't actually know, and the first time he ever heard this story was when I was preaching it, so it kind of freaked him out. And I say all this to say, these 3 guys were, my cord of 3 strands. We maybe never will get to the point where we spoon each other for warmth, but I know that when I fall, they're the ones who pick me back up. And I know that when I'm struggling and when I need help, these were the guys that were there for me. Because we knew that you couldn't do life alone. And I think of my friend, CT on the end, and that was actually the last time we ever really did this with him because he was graduating from college. And the thought he had of, I'm leaving my 3 best friends behind, and I'm moving on to the real world. And how much of a struggle that was for him, and how afraid he was to take that next step. And as friends, we did everything we could to pour into him and encourage him, and when he was falling, to pick him back up, because that's what our responsibility was as friends. That's what we're called to do as his friends. And then C-Dub, at the time when he came to Milligan, he was dating a girl that he definitely was madly in love with her, but the problem was he was in Tennessee and she was in Bel Air. And so the long-distance relationship, starting college, and how much of a struggle that was for him to continue to grow this relationship over the phone, or even through Skype. And I remember as friends, we tried our best to continue to encourage him, to let him know, this is worth it. You need to do this. You love this girl, keep it up. And when our friends harassed him because, we'd go out on a Friday night, but he'd stay home to talk on the phone, we were there to say, this is the right thing. You need to put the time in. When in his relationship he was falling, we were there to pick him back up. And then with Curtis, I remember our junior year, it was Easter, and Curtis was driving back, and the other 3 guys, we were there already, and Curtis gives me a call and says, hey, I know it's not Tuesday, and I know we always hang out on Tuesday, but can we go to Applebee's tonight? There's just a lot going on. And so we're like, of course, no doubt. Tuesday, it's not about the day, it's about the people. And so, cool, let's go. And so we get to Applebee's, and Curtis begins to tell us this story about how someone who was really close to him, someone he loved, had just passed away. And not only did someone pass away, but as a junior in college, because of his relationship with her, they asked him to do the funeral. We're talking a junior in college. And so Curtis, struggling to balance, how do I mourn this loss, but then also celebrate this life as a 20-year-old? And so that night we stayed up late and we sat with Curtis and we prayed with Curtis and we did everything we could to encourage him that it's okay to mourn. Let's talk about the good stuff too, though. Because as friends, that was our responsibility. And as friends, we know we cannot do life alone, and that's what we need. And I think about me and, my relationship with my now wife. We had ups and downs. It's not easy. Relationships aren't easy. And so while we're at school, there were times when we were down and things weren't clicking, and we just didn't know, is this the right thing? Is this the right relationship? And every time that happened, my friends would pull me aside. Sometimes they'd take her aside as well and say, you guys need to work this out. Because that's what friends do. And some of you right now, you have friends that are in relationships that are bad. Maybe it's their marriage, maybe it's friendships, maybe it's the people who influence them. And we're so afraid to go into each other's relationships and try to help our friends because it's their stuff. It's their stuff to deal with. It's their relationship to deal with. But Solomon, the wisest person ever lived, says we need people. We need people to come into our lives and come into our relationships and help us because we're falling. We're spiritually falling, we're emotionally falling, we're physically falling. And as friends, we are called to pick each other back up. And throughout college, we continue to meet with these guys, and it was great. But one of the things I want you to know is that this group of friends right here, it took a very long time for us to get to a point where we trusted each other. It started originally with me, Curtis, and our friend CT with the curly hair on the end, in a basement talking about life. Nothing serious. We didn't know each other that well, and it was awkward. We knew right away this wouldn't be, we're best friends. We're the three best friends that anyone could have right away. And eventually we get down, and our friend CT's like, hey, I've got this friend. His name is C-Dub. And I remember thinking, who calls himself C-Dub? And he says, I've got this friend, and he needs people. And so CT says, hey, do you mind, can we add another person? Because we know that this kid is alone, and he can't do this stuff by himself. And I can be honest, immediately I was like, no. Nope, I like my group. I like the two guys I've got. I'm comfortable with these guys. We're finally getting to a point where we feel good about it. I don't want to add another. And I remember sitting down in the basement of our dorm and both of them saying, we need this, and he needs this too, because this is what we're called to do, is be in relationship with one another. And I say all this to let you know, we've been talking about life groups for the past 2 weeks, and we've been excited, and we've shared some really cool videos with you and some really cool stuff. But one of the things I want you to know is that life groups are not perfect. And I want you to know that we will never portray that these groups of people are perfect and have it all together, because we're imperfect people. And that's the best thing about it. Life groups are an opportunity for imperfect people to get together and just to work through the awkward. And it takes time. And honestly, like if you fully believe, I'm perfect, we don't want you. That's not what we are. Life groups are groups of people that get together who are a mess. And that's okay, because we're people. And so we've been talking about life groups, and I want you guys to know they're not perfect, but they're a bunch of people who are trying to get better. There are a bunch of people who are trying to take these steps and to figure out what this is, and it's going to start slow. You're not going to show up this next week, and show up and all of a sudden you guys are best friends and you're hanging out on the weekends. It doesn't happen that way. It's going to start slow, and that's a good thing. But one of the things I want to encourage you guys, when it comes to life groups, you're going to get out of life groups what you put into it. If you want shallow friendships, that's what you're going to get. But if you want real relationships and deep relationships and friends who can pick you back up when you fall down, then that's what you need to put into a life group. And when we get together and we talk about life groups, that's what we're talking about. We want people who want depth. We want people who want real relationships. If you want it to be shallow, these are not the place for you. They're not. We want real people with real problems to get together and just try to do life together, because we know how important it is to not do life alone. A few weeks ago at ACC, we kind of introduced a new purpose statement. And we said ACC exists to love God, love people, and serve our community. And that's exactly what we try to do, to love God, love people, and serve our community. And that's exactly what we try to do in our life groups. And what's great about it is the love God and love people thing, this wasn't just something that we thought of. This is something that comes straight from the Bible. And Solomon, when he gets to the end of Ecclesiastes, when he gets through this entire book and says, all these things are worthless. Being alone is worthless. You need people. Money is worthless. Knowledge is worthless. Property, land, everything material is worthless. He gets to the end, and he has this beautiful way to close out the book of Ecclesiastes, and this is what he says. When all has been heard, the conclusion of the matter is, fear God and keep his commandments, because this is for all humanity. And so a lot of times when people say, you hear the word commands or commandments, they think, man, that's a lot of things. That's a lot. You think of the 10 Commandments, or you think of like all the rules that have been set forth, and you're like, man, I don't know if I can do that. So the thing that is worth the most to us, the thing that will produce results and bring us happiness, is to fear God and keep his commandments, and that's tough. But the beautiful thing about it is in Matthew 22, a guy comes up to Jesus and says, Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus says, love God. First and foremost, you love God. And he said, the second one, though, is like it, without a pause, without a hesitation. He didn't just say stop there. He said the second one is to love people. And he finishes by saying, if you do those two things, the rest comes naturally. It's not a list of things. If you love God and you love people, it all works itself out. And so here's Solomon, the wisest man to ever live. He says, of all the things I've learned, the thing that has the most importance is that we need to fear God and keep his commandments. We need to fear God, and we need to love God, and we need to love people. And that's how we strive to exist as a church, is that we want, as a church, to fear God, and we want to keep his commandments, because the rest comes with it. And when we talk about, the love God, love people, serve our community, that's the exact same thing we do in our life groups. We've spent the last few weeks talking about relationships and discipleship and how awesome they are. But one of the things I want to talk to you right now is about, what do we do in a life group? I don't want it to be vague. I don't want you to show up not knowing what life group looks like. Life groups are imperfect people that get together and we do our best to love God, love people, and serve our community. And we talk about loving God. It says up there, a sermon-based discussion. There are times when you come on a Sunday morning and you leave with questions. And I think that's one of the hardest parts about Sunday morning in church, is that I have the opportunity to talk to you, and you don't have the opportunity to talk back. Our life groups allow us that opportunity to talk back. Our life groups, when we meet during the week, what we do is we take what we talked about on Sunday and we dig deeper into that during the week. We want you to come with questions. We want you to come with things that are exciting. We want you to come with examples of how this is happening in your life. We want you to come angry. We want you to show up thinking and with some sort of emotion towards what you learned on Sunday. We don't want it to just be a come in on Sunday, take it, and then leave. And that's why we're doing this. That's why we get together during the week to talk about what we learned on Sunday, to fight it out. It's a good thing. Second is to love people. It says building community together. Solomon says that, two is better than one, and a cord of three strands is not easily broken. We want to build relationships inside these life groups. And part of that means we need to have fun. Do you guys remember what fun is? Yeah, as an adult, you kind of forget that fun exists, And so we know in order for us to have fun, sometimes we need to plan fun, which sounds really nerdy. But our life groups take the time to plan fun, because sometimes life is tough, and sometimes relationships stink, and we just need the opportunity to go out and hang out together. And the last part says serve our community, and that's kind of self-explanatory. If we have 14 groups of people, and they're not serving, and all they're doing is taking it again, we're not doing what God wants us to do. Glen Burnie needs love, and our life groups are going to take the time to find areas that they can pour into and really serve the community. And there's two other things. As you guys came in today, you should have gotten a sign-up. It's inside your bulletin. There's a list of your life groups on here, the leaders, where they're at and what time they are. And typically what we do is we have you sign up, and then 3 months later we stop them and sign up again and stop them and sign up again. We're not doing that anymore. The most important thing when we focus on our life groups is that we want our groups to be open. We want people to show up at a life group, and we want them at any time to feel like they have the opportunity to grow relationships. And so, this is the last time we'll ever do these sign-ups. And I'm sure you're asking, well, why are you doing it today? The main reason why we're doing this today is because if you sign up for a life group, we want our leaders to just be ready. We want them to have the opportunity to know who's coming to their group, to connect with you, and know, these are the people that when they show up next week, these are the people that I'm caring for. And so, I really want you to take the time to look at this, and if you want to sign up for a life group and you want these real relationships, check the box. Don't show up and don't get here today and say, you know what, I'll do it next time. Because if you're not going to do it next time, you're not going to do it now. If you're not going to do it now, you're not going to do it next time. We know that. We say it all the time, that tomorrow never comes, only today. And the other thing that we want to focus on when it comes to life groups is the fact that we want the opportunity to invite people and grow these groups. You know, I asked you earlier, if you had a friend who was sick, if you had someone that needed healing, would you carry them to a place where they could be healed? Life groups are a place that bring healing. You know, if you're saying, yeah, of course I'd carry my friend, then you should have the opportunity to bring them to your group of friends, to bring them to a life group so that they can be healed. Kind of changes it a little bit, you know? And when I think about it, it's like, well, I'd definitely carry my friend if he was bleeding to a hospital, but would I bring my friend to a life group? And we want to give everyone the opportunity to do that. And so our goal is that we bring new people in and we continue to grow these life groups so much to a point that instead of having one life group with a ton of people, we have 2 life groups. Because like Solomon said, 2 is better than 1. And so if it works with people, it works with groups of people. And so when we talk about life groups, these are the things that we talk about. The opportunity to grow in relationships. You know, and this isn't taken from some theory or some book. This is from the Bible. This is from Solomon, the wisest person to ever live, told us straight up that the only thing that's worth our time is to fear God and keep his commandments. And one of those commandments is to love people and to be in relationships. And it's worthless to do things alone. And so right now you have the opportunity to sign up for a life group and to join a life group. But you know what? If you didn't sign up today and you want to come next week, come next week. The week after, if you're like, all right, I'm ready to just do it. But I want to give you the opportunity. One of the greatest things about these life groups and what we have at ACC are the leaders. You know, we've spent the last 2 months as leaders getting together and really focusing on this stuff and developing this stuff so that when you guys get there, that we're ready. And so I know a lot of you are like, I'd like to join a life group, but I don't know anybody. You know, Michael, you know, I see you up there. I know you, or maybe you know Brian. I want to give you the opportunity to meet your leaders.